Let me just do a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me in the room? All right, how's that? That sounds better. And then online, can everybody hear me?
Sound is great online.
Perfect. Okay, well, welcome. So there was a company about 5 years ago that had a modestly successful product and a dozen developers. They did well during the pandemic, got some investment capital, and grew quickly. Now they have 4 products, nearly 100 people in product engineering. The question is, how do you scale an organization like this? How do you keep everyone productive, happy, and communicating effectively? I'm James Shore, and I'm a consultant specializing in scaling software organizations. I've been working on these sorts of questions for over a decade. And a few years ago, I came across an innovative approach called FAST. It was a little crazy, but it was also intriguing. So I tried it, and it worked. It worked very well. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Fair warning, innovation is not for everyone. You can be safe or you can be great. This talk isn't for the people who want to play safe. All right, so back to our example. We've got a company that's grown rapidly, and how do we organize them? Well, one common approach is component teams. You divide your software up into technical responsibilities and then assign people to each responsibility. The problem with this is it maximizes cross-team dependencies, and cross-team dependencies are where your delays and your errors come from. Somebody always ends up as the bottleneck too, which isn't great either. Plus, an organization of 100 can't really be divided into 4 teams. It's 2 to 3 times that. And the real world isn't as pretty as this diagram. It's actually more like this. This is real. It's from a company I worked with that had 40 component teams. So let's try again. If we're not going to use component teams, we can use feature teams instead. They're also known as stream-aligned teams. A stream-aligned team owns a particular product or segment of a product. It's cross-functional, and it has all the skills needed to autonomously own delivery of that value stream from end to end. Our example company has 4 products, so we can split people up into 4 teams. We've got the legacy moneymaker, the big bet for the future, an opportunity to expand our presence in part of our market, and a far future bet that has yet to prove itself. The problem is these opportunities aren't all the same size. Most of our efforts should be going into the legacy moneymaker, and we're putting serious money into the future bet. The other 2 products are pretty small. We're never going to put much money into the market expansion, and the far future bet needs to prove itself before we invest serious money into it. But now we have a problem. Some of these teams are way too big. We can turn to a book called Team Topologies for ideas, and if you haven't seen this book, I highly recommend it. It provides ways of organizing teams so you can keep them small, 7 or so people per each team, while still keeping them autonomous and focused on delivering value. And that's what this example company did. They're actually a real company. And despite the mess, it worked pretty well. The teams were autonomous. Folks were mostly happy, except operations. But honestly, when are they happy? Thank you. That joke was meant for you, sir. Okay, over time, several problems emerged. First, everyone was so autonomous, silos formed. People barely interacted across teams, even in the same product. This made it difficult to succeed at cross-team initiatives and hard to move people between teams. Second, teams were static. When business needs changed, adding and removing people from teams was a big deal. Because teams are limited in size, it often required reorganizing teams, which was a huge disruption. Third, specialties, UX, security, operations, they were spread too thin. They didn't have, you didn't need a full-time person on every team, but having people work part-time on multiple teams didn't work out that well either. There was constant task switching. It made it hard for people to focus, and it involved a lot of waste. In some cases, such as ops, they did have a centralized platform team, but that team was overloaded. Now, teams weren't really independent either. 4 of the teams shared a legacy monolith. Working in it was an ordeal. No team really owned it. So quality degraded as people focused on, frankly, more fun work that was more about what their team's area of responsibility was. Now, this example is focused on a specific real company, but I've seen these problems before. I think they're inherent in the team topologies model. It's not that team topologies is bad. Actually, up until recently, it was my go-to approach. But the core idea of stream-aligned teams is really solid. But the further you get from that core idea, the worse things get. So we need to build in another direction. We need to build up, not out. Most people think of scaling as adding teams, but that's just one kind of scaling. Horizontal scaling is what I call it. You can also make teams bigger. That's vertical scaling. I mentioned earlier that cross-team dependencies are your main source of delays and errors in a large-scale system. And as an example, NASA once lost a $327 million spacecraft, the one at the top of that rocket, because one team was using metric units and another team was using imperial units. And that may seem like a really obvious mistake, but NASA is known for their attention to these sorts of things. So if NASA can make this mistake, you can too. In my experience, the deciding factor in scaling isn't how many people you have, it's how many teams you have. If you have less than 5 teams, scaling is easy. You just have to talk to each other. Somewhere between 5 and 10 teams, you have to add explicit coordination mechanisms, and that gets a lot harder. And somewhere between 30 and 50 teams, you have to have multiple layers of coordination, and that's even harder still. But if you can scale your teams vertically, make fewer numbers of bigger teams, you can keep that number of teams small. A 300-person product organization needs about 42 teams. I know because I've done that, and that's what it took. We had 42 teams in a 300-person product organization. It worked, but it was very complicated. It took us months to organize. Over time, we faced all the problems I mentioned previously, and they couldn't easily reorganize, especially as business needs changed, because that would mean doing that multi-month reorganization process again, which is very disruptive. That same organization with 300 people would have only needed 6 teams if we'd been able to scale vertically to 50 people per team. If I could go back in time and work with that 300-person org again, that's what I would do instead. So let's return to our example company. That's beautiful, isn't it? Vertical scaling would allow them to consolidate their value streams and incorporate an ops person into each team. It would dramatically simplify their cross-team dependencies. Of course, I'm avoiding the question here, which is, how exactly do you scale teams vertically? Well, I thought you'd never ask. FAST was created by Quentin Cortell, which is a superhero name, in my opinion. You can, Quentin Cortell, you know, like Lois Lane, Clark Kent, it just flows. You can find more at fastagile.io. The FAST Guide is the best place for more information. The website's a little iffy. And as the FAST Guide says, FAST is a lightweight, simple to understand, and simple to master method for organizing people around work that scales. And it's actually a pretty accurate description. There's really only one ceremony in FAST, the FAST meeting. It's how people decide what they're going to work on. And it takes about 10 to 20 minutes and happens twice a week. And that's pretty much all there is to FAST, is this about half an hour a week ceremony called the FAST meeting. Here's how it works. First, everybody gathers together in a big room. Now, all the teams I've used FAST with have been fully remote. So we used a video conference tool, Microsoft Teams in one organization, hated it. Zoom in another, it was adequate. And we use Miro, which is a collaborative whiteboarding tool. The meeting starts with announcements, and then team leaders from the previous cycle, which are called team stewards, describe what their teams have completed since the last FAST meeting. 2 to 3 days ago. Next, product leaders describe their business priorities. On your whiteboard, you'll have a set of high-level priorities. You can see them in the upper right here. My teams work in terms of valuable increments. A lot of teams work in features, but we work in valuable increments, which are the things that we can release that bring value to the organization. You can see in this example that some increments are in progress and some are waiting to be started. When product leads describe their business priorities, what they're doing is describing how these valuable increment priorities have changed. Usually, because this happens twice a week, it's just a quick, nothing has changed. But if something has changed, a product lead will explain what has changed and why. Next, team members volunteer to lead, steward a team. Anybody can steward a team, but most teams are stewarded by engineers. The maximum number of stewards is limited to ensure that we don't have lots of one-person teams. We want to aim for about 3 to 5 people per team. Next, each steward describes what their team is going to work on. The stewards are expected to work on something that advances the collective's business priorities, but they can also use their own judgment on what that is. So most of the time it will be feature work, but they can also be things like improving the build or cleaning up noisy logs or something else that's beneficial to the team's progress. Usually, the teams are just continuing work they did in the previous cycle. And then finally, people self-select onto the teams they want to work on based on what they want to do, what they want to learn, who they want to work with, and ultimately, what's best for the organization. And again, most of the time, they continue with the same team that they were working with in the previous cycle. And that's the fast meeting. It takes 10 to 20 minutes, and it's really all there is to fast. It's simple, it's fast, and it's effective. People usually have a lot of questions at this point, and I do have time in this talk for questions, but let me provide some examples before I take questions from the audience. And Heather, are you going to be responding to chat and
Yes.
bring those questions up as well?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So this is a composite example taken from the 3 real-world collectives that I've worked with. All of the actions, since these were all fully remote companies, took place on a Miro board that looks something like this. We called that our team room. It has 3 parts. First, priorities and teams, which is the focus of our twice-weekly fast meeting. Long-term release planning, which is the focus of the product managers. And task maps, which are the focus of the teams. I'm going to talk about release maps and task maps, release plans and task maps in a moment. But first, let me show you what people are seeing during the fast meeting. At the top, we've got our business priorities. In the middle, the teams, and at the bottom, it's just a template that we copy because we choose our teams from scratch every time we have the fast meeting. The rest of the items are just instructions. On the left, those purple stickies are in the fast agenda. On the right, some instructions for how to create a task map. So let's go ahead and zoom in a bit closer. Now, this example team, this is a redacted version of a real team's work. And this team, at the time that I took the picture, was still new to FAST and still dealing with a lot of work in progress from their pre-FAST way of working. Now, so what you see here in the top middle is the work in progress. There are 14 valuable increments in progress. I prefer that they only have 2 to 4 things in progress, basically no more than 1 per team, and only 2 to 3 up next, which is on the right there. And in fact, they have cleared a lot since this picture was taken. But what I find in a lot of organizations is that they tend to try to make people happy by working on everybody's priorities and maximize their work in progress, which of course is not very good for getting things done. There's often a focus in organizations on getting things started rather than getting things finished. Now, on the bottom of the picture, you can see the teams. The top left, oops, let me bring this back. On the top left is the on-call and tier 3 support team. This is a predetermined rotation. Although people can self-select, they can volunteer to be a part of this team. And in fact, that's what people would do when they were under heavy support load. The next three teams, teams 1, 2, and 3, which are the ones in the middle there, those are various engineering efforts working on some of the work in progress priorities. And the fourth team was the product manager and user experience designer looking at upcoming work and figuring out what it was going to look like. Each orange sticky there at the bottom associated with the teams has the name of a person on it. I've redacted it in this picture, but you can't read it anyway. The way people join a team is they take their sticky and they physically, in Miro, just drag it over the team they want to join. So when they volunteer to be the steward, they put it in the first box that says steward. And when they want to join the team, they put it in the rest and the additional space there. Now, people often wonder, isn't it chaos with people changing teams all the time? And the answer is no, not really. Because people don't change teams as often as you think they do. Generally speaking, people tend to stick with a team until the work is done because it's just human nature to want to see something through. So they'll stick with it until either the work is done or something comes up that needs their attention. So what this visualization shows you is the first 3 months of a 45-person collective that I worked with. This is going to scroll in a moment. Each row represents a fast meeting, about 2 to 3 days of work. And each column represents a valuable increment. The new icon at the top there represents a valuable increment starting, and the green checkbox represents the valuable increment finishing. The skull indicates that an increment has been canceled for some reason. These dark black lines, that's voluntary movement between teams. So each of those little tiny stickies that you can't really read with a line coming off of it, that's a person moving between teams. Now, people would also go on PTO, they would join the on-call team. I haven't shown that movement in this diagram because it makes it hard to read. Now, you can see here that in the first 2 weeks, there was a lot of movement. That was mainly due to people not having worked together before, so they were moving around to find the people and topics they wanted to work with. But as time went on, that started to settle. What you're going to see here is that people mainly moved because their team didn't need them anymore, or because something new started that needed their attention. You'll also notice that they started delivering a lot more quickly. They previously delivered something about once every 2 to 3 months. Now they're working in smaller pieces and delivering something every week, sometimes multiple things per week. So that's the fast meet. It's the heart of fast, and it's about 10 to 20 minutes twice a week. I found that fast is pretty easy to adopt. It only takes about 2 to 4 weeks to get this core concept down pat. That's not to say that fast as a whole is easy to adopt, because fast involves a lot of teamwork that people aren't used to, but the fast meeting itself is easy. Now, next up, I'm going to talk about release planning and then teamwork and task maps. But before I do, are there any questions here about the fast meeting itself? We've got about 5-6 minutes for questions at this point.
You get to go to 2:15.
Yeah, I've got more to say though.
Okay.
So I'll take about 5 or 6 minutes of questions on this specific topic, then we'll move on to the other ones. Go ahead.
You're like a central governance that actually look at it and say, hey, you probably shouldn't do this team, or actually we don't want you to do this team, or is it purely volunteer?
Yeah, so the question was, for those of you who couldn't hear it, is there central governance that says you can't be on this team or you shouldn't be on this team? And the answer is no, but a little bit yes. Generally speaking, the self-selection is entirely self-directed. It's done by the people in the collective to the teams that they think that they should join. However, although this wasn't true with the first collective I worked with because they only had one person in a management role, they had 5 executives, but only 1 engineering manager. I think it's, if you actually have engineering managers in your organization, they're going to be paying attention to what people are doing. And if they see that somebody is not going where their skills are best situated, they might have a conversation with them. Now, I haven't found this to be an issue in most cases. That said, and one of the collectives that is going on right now, they did have an issue where bugs were coming in and nobody was volunteering to steward a team working on those bugs, except for the team lead. So she did just today say, hey, folks, remember what we're here to do is do what's best for the organization, and that includes fixing bugs. So if necessary, there can be a conversation that happens in a side channel, but people's instinct about how often that's needed and how important it is it's not as true as you might think it is. It's fairly rare that she needs to do something like that. Go ahead.
One leave a team if they're working on some critical task and something needs to be finished. Can somebody still leave the team, go to some other team?
The fast meeting. So you're supposed to stay with the fast team that you're on until the next fast meeting. But at the next fast meeting, all the teams are recreated from scratch. New people volunteer to steward, not always the same people. Often, in fact, what I've seen in healthy teams is they'll encourage each other to steward the team next time so that they can share that leadership experience. Job of the steward is to make sure the team is communicating well and working effectively together. So different people will steward the teams. It will typically be a continuation of previous work. And it is possible for different people to join each team. Although, again, people tend to join the team that they're already on. But if something new has come up that needs your attention, then you are completely welcome to go work with that team.
I have a couple of questions, but it sounds like there's somebody back there that has one too. Oh, or not.
I was going to go first.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The first question is, does it require QA resources to be spread across teams? And they can't hear me, so you might want to repeat that.
Yeah, so the question is, does it require QA resources to be spread across teams? Now, one of the neat things about the FAST Collective is that the whole group of people that's forming these sub-teams is kind of like one big team. So people choose to go where they're needed. For example, in my experience, user experience designers are typically very understaffed in organizations. And so if you've got 3 teams that all need a UX person, that person gets spread really thin. But in the FAST environment, what happens is that UX person goes to the team that needs them for this 2 to 3 day cycle, works with them, and then can move on. They're still spread thin, but they're able to focus better, which means that they're not wasting as much time. But in one of these collectives, the UX person told me that prior to FAST, about 50% of their time was wasted just from task switching, which didn't help their overloading. And now they are able to focus on what they need to focus on. So none of the collectives I've been involved with have had dedicated QA people, but if they did, I think we'd see the same thing, that they could go to go where the work needed their help. Go ahead.
For your collectives, how do you deploy your managers? Is it like by front end, you have one front end manager, back end manager, or do they like one manager watches three projects and like that? Like how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, how do you deploy managers? And I am in the midst of my experience with the second and third collective I've worked on. The very first collective I worked on was 45 people. They had 24 engineers, 12 product owners, which is kind of a weird ratio, and 5 executives, and 1 engineering manager who really wanted to be an architect, not a people manager. So it didn't come up in that first collective. Now, in these new collectives, it is coming up. And that the way we created these collectives is we combined 2 teams, and each team had an engineering manager. So we are still working out what the best way to do this is, but my instinct is that if you have multiple managers in the collective, particularly if you've got a larger collective, say 50 to 60 people, then we're going to choose one of the more senior managers to be kind of the director for the collective, with the other managers reporting to him or her. And then the individual team level managers, what I'm going to look at doing first is having them focus on particular technical areas. So the company I'm working with right now, they've got team leads who are kind of like junior managers. They've got managers. They don't have directors. And they have the engineering VP, which is me in an interim role. So I'm thinking a director for the collective, and then managers focused on back end, front end, ops, et cetera, as needed for various specialties. Does that answer your question? Yeah, that's my theory. What I can't tell you whether or not that works, because I haven't had a chance to try it yet.
Somehow I get the feeling that things are fluid
Yes.
and they are moving all the time. Can you comment on the on-time delivery and meeting schedules and things like that?
Mhm. So the question is that things are fluid and they're changing all the time. FAST, I don't know if I said this, FAST stands for Fluid Scaling Technology. So, yep, it's fluid. On-time delivery. So the thing is software is delivered when it's done. And there are lots of things you can do to make software deliver more slowly, but not a lot you can do to make it deliver more quickly. Generally speaking, the trajectory that your software is on, the maximum speed at which you can deliver, is capped by whatever you did 6 months ago. So fast doesn't make you go faster, but I do think it prevents you from going slower because you're not spending a lot of time in meetings and overhead. There's a separate question of forecasting and prediction, which may be what you were getting at. Forecasting and prediction gets into release planning, which my time is up for this topic anyway, so let's move on to release planning.
I do have one really quick question, which is how short is too short and how long is too long for the fast meeting?
In my experience, an effective fast meeting is about 10 to 20 minutes. So if it's less than 10 minutes, I suppose that could happen in a small collective. But I'd be wondering what's going on here. When the stewards get up and they describe what their team's going to work on, they're saying, this is the thing that our team is going to work on, and this is the kind of help I need. And so if that conversation isn't happening, then it may be too fast. If it's more than 20 minutes, then there's probably some side conversations going on. Often people in these sorts of meetings, you've probably seen this in stand-ups, they get tempted to go into the minutia of what's going on. So there is a need to facilitate this meeting and to keep it sort of short and sweet and say, we will schedule a separate meeting for this side conversation. The people who are impacted by this can join and everybody else can be affected. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so let's move on and talk about the release planning, which gets to the question of forecasting. Now, there's not much more to FAST than the FAST meetings, but there is other things that you have to do in a FAST collective, and one of them is product management and release planning. Now, the FAST guide suggests using Jeff Patton's story mapping for release planning, but you can use whatever you like. I use the chartering and visual planning approach described in my book, plug. It's called The Art of Agile Development. Just came out in a second edition. It's got a goldfish on the cover. It's great. Now, in this team room, the top part is reserved for release planning. If we zoom in on that, we see that the team's charter is on the left and the release map is on the right. The charter has the team's purpose. This is their long-term vision, their current mission, and the mission indicators. How do we know we're on the right track? And the stakeholder context diagram. Now, I don't expect you to be able to see this. The stakeholder context diagram helps the team understand their stakeholders and how they relate to the team. This charter is updated on a quarterly cadence. It's used for getting everybody on the team on the same page, but it doesn't get a lot of attention between chartering sessions. The release map, which is next door, is where the product managers put the majority of their focus. This is a constantly updated map of possible work the team could do. These are opportunities. It's organized however the product managers like. In this case, they've grouped their increments into major initiatives. Here's one of them. If we zoom into it, we see that it's broken up into various deliverables. Those are the pink stickies, which are in varying stages of completion. And then those pink stickies have been broken down into milestones, which are the blue user stories. Now, one thing you're going to notice on this, all the little construction gates indicate work that's in progress. And one thing that I noticed just glancing at this is that we've got 4 separate deliverables in progress. And I would like to see more emphasis on getting a deliverable done and released and delivering value to the organization before starting the next one. But this work was already in progress before we started FAST, which is why you're seeing, again, lots of work in progress. Now, there's nothing about FAST that says you have to be, I see your question. I'll stop in a couple of minutes for more questions. There's nothing in FAST that says you have to focus. That's, again, just the way I approach release planning. you will get more value out of your teams if they work on one thing at a time, because they will get that done faster and you'll start accumulating value from that. So when space is available in the next part of the FAST meeting board, the product managers choose one of those pink stickies, one of the valuable increments, to put in that slot. They can choose any increment from the release plan that they like based on what's most important given the circumstances at that moment. So that's release planning. There is a lot more I can say about release planning, but it's not really specific to FAST. So I'm going to gloss over the details here. But there's this great book, Art of Agile Development, if you heard of it. Yeah, check it out. It's all in there. So I'm going to talk about how, by the way, you all are a tough crowd. I hope the people online, you're laughing hilariously, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yes, I see it. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about how valuable increments are fleshed out in a moment, which are going to give the details of how people work together on teams. But first, I'll take questions on release planning. I've only got a couple minutes here, but did I answer it? All right. Let's see how we're doing on time here.
Got about 13 minutes.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the next topic. So let's talk about teamwork. FAST doesn't require teams to work together in any particular way. But I have found that the teamwork aspects of FAST has been the challenge in every company I've worked with. In fact, I'd say this is the main challenge people have with FAST. And that's because most companies don't actually have teamwork. They have JIRA tickets and people picking up JIRA tickets to work on individually in groups of one-person teams that they call teams. FAST expects team members to work together, to coordinate with each other, help with each other's work. In the parlance of extreme programming, this is called collective ownership. And I suppose you don't have to work that way. It's something that I find valuable. So it's something that I've introduced in every company that I've introduced FAST to. But this is the part everyone has struggled with. FAST is easy. It's the teamwork that's hard. Now, by default, FAST use something called discovery trees for team coordination. If you look in the FAST guide, you'll see that's what you'll see. Now, I've tried them, and what I found is every time I try to teach people about discovery trees, they look at me like I've grown a second head. They don't get it. They really struggle with it. So in the two new collectives I'm working with now, I'm using a simple variant called a task map, which is also in my book. If we go back to the example team room, the bottom part of the room is reserved for task maps. That's where the teams work. Each task map corresponds to a valuable increment, one of the pink stickies in the in progress section of the board. Now, this is actually a composite example from all three collectives I've worked with. So the task maps don't actually correspond to the pink stickies, but they do in a real board. So let's go ahead and zoom in. This is one task map. And the first thing you'll notice about the task map is that it isn't just a list of tasks. It's an informative workspace. It's a rich environment showing everything the team needs to know about the valuable increment they're working on. So you're going to see screenshots, you're going to see mock-ups, flowcharts, even code snippets on that board. When a team is ready to start, or when the valuable increment is ready to be started, a product manager will steward a team to get that work going. And the initial team is going to include a product manager, often a UX designer. If you've got QA, then presumably a QA person to start shifting left to think about what are we going to look at to define success. And it will also include several engineers who will get the work started. One of those engineers is going to volunteer to be the valuable increment steward. In the FAST guide, they're called feature stewards, but I work with valuable increments on my team, so we call it the valuable increment steward. The valuable increment steward commits to seeing the valuable increment through from beginning to end. They're responsible for keeping up with everything that's going on with the increment. When somebody has a question about the increment, the valuable increment steward is the person to ask. When work starts on a valuable increment, the map is empty. The product manager describes several milestones that will demonstrate progress from their perspective. These are user stories. Then the whole team works together to refine those user stories further. The goal is to have user stories that will only take 1 to 2 days to complete, but still represent the product manager's perspective. This can be a challenge, And it's something that I find I have to teach people how to do. Those stories are written on blue stickies. Now, you can't read the user story in this screenshot, which is probably good unless you're on Zoom, because it's not very good. It's very technical. And this is a screenshot from a team that's still learning how to create product-focused user stories. Now, once the user stories have been defined, the team will brainstorm tasks. These can be tasks for anybody, UX design tasks, but ops tasks, but most of them are going to be engineering tasks. Each one is meant to be 1 to 2 hours long, and they're written on a yellow sticky. Now, you don't have to have all the tasks figured out in advance. In fact, some of the tasks will be figure out what to do. And as you learn about what's needed, you'll add more yellow stickies to the board. When a task is complete, it's turned green. So you can look at this and say, they're about 50 to 70% done, just eyeballing it on this particular story. And if a story is blocked or if a task is blocked for some reason, then it's turned red. So we do see that merge to live sticky is blocked. You also notice little icons on the task. You see that butterfly in the middle right, or that weird lion with a leaf on its head in the top middle? Those are people's icons. When somebody is working on, every person on the team has an icon. And when they're working on a task, they put their icon on that task. That way, anybody on the team can see what everybody else is working on at any time. And if they have a question, they know who to go ask about that particular task. I find that people struggle with several aspects of the task maps. First, they have trouble making small stories that represent product manager's perspective. This has been a problem in every team I've worked with, not just fast teams. Second, they have trouble breaking their work down into tasks that are only an hour or two long. Once they get the hang of it, though, they do like it because it allows them to get this sense of progress by continuously checking off tasks throughout the day. And third, and most significantly, they have trouble working together on tasks, collectively owning the results rather than choosing stories to own and work on entirely separately on their own. I help this process along by providing training on shared leadership skills, something called leaderful teams, for those of you who are familiar with it. But what I found works best is actually just plenty of time, supplemented by coaching when possible. That very first collective I worked with 45 people, they only had one engineering manager who really didn't want to be a people manager. They had a lot of interpersonal issues because there was nobody there to coach them in interpersonal issues, but they still got it over time. But they definitely struggled with this at the beginning. So now you've seen all major elements of FAST, the FAST meeting, release planning, teamwork. The only thing that's really unique to FAST is the FAST meeting. The rest, you're welcome to do however you like. I'm going to wrap up with my recommendations in a moment. Before I do, I think I have time for 1 or 2 questions about teamwork. Yes. So are there any questions about teamwork and how that works?
Okay, a couple of things here. One, you made a comment, or you said the story only takes 1 to 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that does that mean a story is all done with QA and everything is story developed? What did you mean by that?
Well, it's not done unless it works. So yes.
So it is functioning story.
That's right.
And I still want to go back to my earlier question where I asked how did the product get released on time? I was referring to the fact that we want to be first to the market and beat everybody else. And how does this concept, I'm sure it supports all those aspects, but how well does it work?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you make sure that stuff is done on time? It's
a little different than time.
Mm-hmm.
Time is your scheduling. But today we are also in a phase one today, but we're always in this situation. I want to beat my competition going to market. So, see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we beat the competition to market? There's only one way to deliver faster today, as opposed to what the decisions you made 6 months ago that affect your progress today. If you want to deliver faster today with the team you have and the system that they're in, you have to cut scope. That is the only way to deliver faster. So thinking in terms of valuable increments and how you can make those increments smaller is how I help teams with this. And then I focus on internal quality, which is how easy the code is to modify and maintain, which will make me faster in 6 months, but it won't do anything for me today. In fact, it will make me slower today, which is the big challenge that so many companies struggle with, is they would rather ship faster today by sacrificing internal quality and kill the performance in 6 months, which as a VP of engineering is a battle I am constantly fighting. Not really about fast, though. This is sort of the conundrum of, I think, product management in general. And fast doesn't help, but it doesn't hurt either. I'd say it helps by lowering your bureaucracy and overhead. So we've got just about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to wrap up with my recommendations for all of you. So you've seen all the major pieces that you need to be successful with FAST. We've got the heart of FAST, which is the FAST meeting, where people decide what they're going to work on and who they're going to work with. FAST meeting is fed by your release plans, which you can make any way you like. And I never did talk about forecasting, and I apologize. Come talk to me afterwards. I've got some techniques. I use charters in a release map for my release planning. Again, you can use whatever works for you. And you also get to choose how people work together. I prefer collective ownership, and I use task maps to make the work visible and to enable teams to work together. Now, the question is, how well does this actually work? First collective I worked with, as I mentioned, they had 45 people in it. I helped them for about 6 months and then spoke to them 6 months after that. And this is what they had to say. The primary executive sponsor for it told me that FAST has created a high degree of transparency. The whole department understands the body of work to be done now. Those 5 executives, but also all the people on the teams. We saw that they had just-in-time matching of people to the work to be done, which is a major issue for this particular team, which was constantly changing priorities due to their larger stakeholder environment. And execs had the ability to dynamically adjust priorities, which was really important to them. When we started, they were terrible at collaborating. They had all been working independently, individually on their own little things, and we had brought them together, and they really struggled with that, again, partly because they didn't have any coaching support in the organization. But after a year, they'd gotten pretty good at it, they told me. They also saw improved engineering leadership from the stewards, which was something that, on that particular collective, we said that only engineers could steward a team because they had a 2-to-1 ratio of engineers to product owners, and the product owners were always sort of taking over leadership and sort of stepping on the engineers. And that giving people the opportunity to steward teams and gain those skills really helped them. One thing that surprised me was that integrating offshore engineers turned out to be really easy. They brought in a whole team in India, and I said, well, that's 12 and a half hours away from the West Coast, where most of your engineers are. Probably should make a new collective. But they chose to bring them into the existing collective, and I was told that they merged right in, were productive quite quickly, which was surprising news. They did have one major issue, which is that the larger organization was constantly changing direction on them, but I don't think that was related to FAST. So my experience with FAST and as a whole has been extremely positive. The core idea of team topologies is solid. It's stream-aligned teams. The further you get from that core with things like enabling teams, complicated subsystem teams, and platform teams, the more problems you're going to encounter. So the next step, if you need to scale, is to grow your teams vertically rather than horizontally. If you have a stream-aligned team that needs more people, don't add enabling teams or complicated subsystem teams. Instead, keep the focus on stream-aligned teams instead. I found that it's easy to incorporate specialties. It's incredibly responsive to changing business needs. It's resilient to people joining and leaving. You are likely to find that collective ownership is a challenge, and team dynamics could be an issue depending on how well people work together today. So if you want to try this, find 2 closely related teams working on the same product. Prepare people to work together with collective ownership using something like task maps. Figure out how you're going to do release planning, including how you're going to adapt your Jira usage so that you can use the Miro board for a lot of the instantaneous stuff. And then give it a try. I find that it takes 2 to 6 weeks for the FAST meeting itself to become second nature, and 2 to 5 months for the collective ownership to really come through, because again, that's the hard part, not FAST itself. So to conclude, at its core, FAST is a tool for organizing large groups of people. Starts by gathering everybody in a room. Stewards describe what the teams have done since the last FAST meeting. Product leaders describe how business priorities have changed. And then people volunteer to steward teams, and everyone self-selects onto those teams. It's fast, it's fluid, and it works. It's the most effective approach to scaling I've yet seen, and I've been trying this lots of different approaches for quite a while. If you're in an environment where being great is more important than being safe, I encourage you to give it a try. Thank you.